This is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister.
So this is Israel's Prime Minister, who recently spoke at a memorial for the victims of the Hamas-led attack on October 7, 2023.
It was 6:29 a.m. on Saturday, October 7th, 2023, when a hail of rockets rained down on Israel.
Making it clear he's determined to get all the dead hostages back from Gaza. He also stressed that Israel would continue fighting terrorism with full force, leaving no room for compromise. His statement came just hours after Hamas handed over the bodies of 2 more hostages, although they admitted they couldn't access the remaining 19. There's been a lot of anger in Israel because Hamas hasn't returned all the bodies as agreed in last week's Gaza ceasefire deal, even though the US has downplayed the idea that this counts as breaking the agreement. Hamas, meanwhile, insists it's still committed to the ceasefire and keen to hand over all remaining corpses. In a statement, the group also pointed fingers at Netanyahu, claiming he was stopping them from properly searching for the hostages' remains by blocking heavy machinery and diggers from entering Gaza. Despite the challenges, Hamas is still trying to recover the captives' bodies. Al Jazeera broadcast footage showing gunmen guarding bulldozers digging in the dark in Khan Yunis, a southern city in Gaza. Reports suggest that Hamas has shared coordinates and aerial photos of where bodies are located with mediators, showing some cooperation despite the tensions. Across the Atlantic, the US President Donald Trump hinted that he could support resuming fighting if Hamas continues to kill people, referencing reports of internal violence in Gaza, where Hamas has allegedly targeted rivals in recent days. On his Truth Social platform, Trump warned, "We will have no choice but to go in and kill if Hamas doesn't stop," although he previously ruled out sending American soldiers onto the ground in Gaza. Back in Israel, the government confirmed that 2 bodies handed over to the International Committee of the Red Cross on Wednesday night had been identified as Inbar Heyman and Sergeant Major Mohammed al-Atarash. Their return, overseen by masked Hamas gunmen in Gaza City, brought the total number of dead hostages returned since Monday to 9 out of 28. All 20 living hostages had been released earlier that Monday in exchange for 250 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails and 1,718 detainees from Gaza.
Israel has confirmed the last 20 living hostages held by Hamas since October the 7th, 2023 have been freed from captivity. And in return, nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees have been released by Israel.
Israel has reacted to the delay in returning the remaining bodies by threatening to restrict aid flowing into Gaza. On Thursday, Netanyahu addressed an official memorial at the Mount Herzl National Cemetery in Jerusalem, 2 days after the Hebrew calendar anniversary of the attack. He reiterated his commitment to returning all dead Israeli and foreign hostages and stressed that Israel would not hesitate to return to military action if attacked again. His words were firm. "Our fight against terrorism will continue with full force. We will not allow evil to raise its head. We will exact the full price from anyone who harms us." The Israeli military's campaign in Gaza followed the 7 October attack, during which Hamas gunmen killed roughly 1,200 people in southern Israel and took 251 hostages. Since then, at least 67,967 people have died in Israeli attacks in Gaza, according to the territory's health ministry, whose figures the UN considers reliable. Sergeant Major Mohammed al-Atarash, an Israeli Bedouin soldier, was buried on Thursday, a day after his body was returned by Hamas. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum in Israel called on Netanyahu's government to immediately halt the implementation of the ceasefire deal until all 19 bodies were returned. After Hamas admitted it couldn't retrieve all the bodies, 2 senior advisors to Trump said preparations for the next phase of the ceasefire deal were still moving forward. They told reporters reporters that the US didn't believe Hamas had broken the agreement by not retrieving more remains, highlighting that the group had acted in good faith by sharing information with mediators. Although the full text of the ceasefire agreement hasn't been made public, a leaked version suggested that not all bodies might be immediately accessible. One senior US advisor mentioned that the sheer level of destruction in Gaza could slow down searches, and said that civilians who provided information on the location of remains could receive rewards. Hamas also complained that over 20 Palestinians have died in Gaza due to Israeli actions since the ceasefire began on Friday. The Israeli military, which still holds more than half of Gaza, maintains that it fires to remove threats to its troops. Meanwhile, efforts are underway in Gaza to identify bodies of Palestinians returned by Israel in recent days in exchange for hostages' bodies. On Thursday, another 30 bodies were returned, bringing the total to 120. Reports suggested that the Rafah crossing with Egypt might reopen after being closed since Israeli forces took over the Gaza side in May 2024. The ceasefire deal specifies that its reopening would follow the same mechanism used during a temporary ceasefire earlier this year, which allowed injured Palestinians to cross briefly for medical treatment. An Israeli military official said that the date for opening the Rafah crossing would be announced later, once both Israel and Egypt completed the necessary preparations. He emphasized that aid would not pass through Rafah, instead continuing to enter Gaza via Karem Shalom and other crossings after Israeli security checks. The US, for its part, has downplayed claims that Hamas is violating the ceasefire by not returning all dead hostages. So far, only 9 of the 28 dead hostages have been returned, with Hamas saying it needs time and specialized equipment to recover the rest from Gaza's ruins. The delay in returning the dead has led Israel to limit promised aid to Gaza, though 2 senior advisors to Trump said plans to demilitarize the Strip and set up a transitional government are still moving forward. They emphasized that Hamas had returned all living hostages and was cooperating with intermediaries to find the remaining bodies, showing good faith despite the delays. Hamas's armed wing confirmed its commitment to the deal, but noted that some bodies required significant efforts and specialized equipment to recover. One senior US advisor said it could take weeks to retrieve all remains due to the scale of the destruction, and mentioned that Turkish experts might join the search. Rewards might also be offered to civilians providing information. The IDF confirmed the identities of Heyman, who was 27 and killed at the Nova Festival, and Sergeant Major Al-Atarash, who was 39 and died in combat on the same day. The Hostages Families Forum expressed that while the return of Inbar and Muhammad offers some measure of comfort to grieving families, we will not rest until all 19 hostages are brought home. Hamas is required to return all 28 dead hostages as part of the first phase of the Gaza peace plan, though their armed wing says retrieving the remaining bodies is a complex task requiring specialized equipment and effort. Israel has said it will not compromise on returning hostages, with the defense minister instructing the IDF to prepare a comprehensive plan to defeat Hamas if the war resumes. The latest returns followed news that one of 4 bodies handed over by Hamas on Tuesday was not a missing hostage, although families confirmed the identities of the other 3. Meanwhile, UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher called on Israel to immediately open all border crossings into Gaza for aid, stressing that withholding humanitarian assistance shouldn't be used as a bargaining chip. Trump's ceasefire plan, accepted by both Israel and Hamas, envisioned that all 48 hostages would be returned by noon on Monday. While all living hostages were returned that day, the deal seems to recognize that the remains some dead hostages might not have been immediately accessible. Israel has also to hand over the bodies of 15 Palestinians in exchange for each deceased Israeli hostage. So far, 90 Palestinian bodies have been returned in line with this part of the agreement. In Gaza, residents are anxious about the ceasefire holding, and food prices have shot up as people stockpile supplies. Traders are hoarding flour, oil, and sugar, causing shortages and driving up costs, because many fear that the war could start again at any moment. Nevin al-Mughrabi, a mother of 6 displaced from Gaza City, explained that despite the temporary calm, her family continues to live in uncertainty, moving only because they lost their home and don't trust the ceasefire. She noted that prices surged about 30% almost immediately, but people bought anyway, afraid the aid flow could stop at any time. The fragile ceasefire in Gaza exposes the heavy toll of Israel's actions. Despite limited progress in returning hostages and bodies, much of the devastation across Gaza remains, with specialized equipment blocked and mistrust running deep. Israel's insistence on controlling every step slows the peace process and restricts humanitarian aid, leaving civilians trapped in worsening conditions. While a few bodies have been returned, the fate of the remaining 19 dead hostages hangs over grieving families, and skyrocketing prices, scarcity, and uncertainty continue to plague Gaza's residents. Small steps forward are hard won against overwhelming destruction caused by Israeli policies. All in all, the situation is complex and layered. Israel is determined to continue its fight against terrorism while seeking the return of every hostage, living or dead. Hamas insists it's cooperating and committed to the ceasefire, even though challenges on the ground make it hard to meet deadlines. The US, while mediating, maintains that Hamas has acted in good faith, and international organizations are focused on making sure humanitarian aid continues to reach civilians in need. So, even as the hostages' returns provide some comfort, there's a long road ahead for both reconciliation and rebuilding, with countless lives still affected by the fallout of violence and mistrust. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.